Ago Midasi, welcome. Akwaba, greetings. We hope everyone is well today. We hope you are maintaining your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual health, of course, on this Sunday. We are so eternally thankful that you have decided to spend this 60 minutes with us. And on behalf of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, we welcome you to this very critical topic today, the legendary Mawina Kouyate and why we honor Pan-African Women's Day. We start, as we always do, by giving honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And when we say indigenous people, we are talking about the American Indian people. We're not talking about Europeans who have confused identity and want to claim that they're Indians. We're not talking about Africans who know nothing about our African history and so feel they have to make up a history and claim that they've always been here in the Western Hemisphere with zero evidence of that claim. We're talking about the real indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We honor them and respect them in their struggle to gain their land back, and they will gain their land back. And of course, we honor our African ancestors because unlike the confused elements among us, we know our African history. And we would say that anyone who knows even the slightest bit about our African history has no choice but to be extremely honored and proud to be an African, because we have fought to maintain the dignity of our people. And the only people who don't want to claim our history are people who know absolutely nothing about it. And the capitalist system is never going to honor our African history. It's always going to demean and diminish who we are as a people, because that's an essential element of its ability to keep us under control. Because as long as they have us convinced that we have nothing else, no other options other than to sit here on this plantation and fight for a place at the master's table, then that's all we'll ever pursue. We'll never pursue anything beyond that. So we are here to say that we have much more that we can accomplish than that. Who wants to sit at the master's table? We're trying to burn the master's table down. We have an entire homeland of Africa. And until Africa is free, we won't be free. So we thank you for joining us today, the legendary Mawina Kouyate, and why we honor Pan-African Women's Day. And we just get started, as we always do, by just introducing ourselves. I am Ahjamu, longtime organizer with the All-African People's Revolutionary Party in many different places. And with me is my wonderful daughter, Shukura, who grew up in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party Young Pioneer Institute program and is now an adult participant in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, and also pursuing her studies to become the first doctor in our family on this side. And so we appreciate her for everything that she does and our relationship and our ability to work together. We worked together yesterday, helping support Pan-African Women's Day. We did the same thing together for African Liberation Day in May. We continue to meet in work study and do all of these sessions every Sunday in organizing our work for the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. So just honored to do this work with her. And then the objective of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, again, is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa, or the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. We are convinced that until this objective is achieved, that African people scattered in 120 countries worldwide, 2.5 billion of us all over the world, will never be free until we achieve Pan-Africanism. And if you want to understand what Pan-Africanism is about, we direct you to our website, which will give you the address for our website at the end. And the book on the right, Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, lays out our strategy to achieve Pan-Africanism. And you see the logos there of the many Pan-African political formations on the ground throughout Africa. Many of them participated in the Pan-African Women's Day program we had yesterday. And these organizations agreed to Kwame Nkrumah's call for Pan-Africanists to define their work as the objective of one unified socialist Africa. So we continue to build this worldwide fighting force. And we, of course, are linked not only with our chapters worldwide, but relationships with other genuine liberation movements all over the planet. And we continue to do whatever we can to support them in their efforts to gain freedom and liberation, because we're smart enough to understand that every victory that they gain is a victory for us as well. And every victory that we gain is a victory for them as well. So we are eternally thankful again for you coming to join us today. And just to get us started, we're going to have a little different format today. I'm going to start us out talking about Pan-African Women's Day, continuing to commemorate it for this weekend. And then Shukura will close us out by paying tribute to Sister Mawina Kouyate. And so we'll just start by just making sure folks recognize that Pan-African Women's Day, and I'll just say this to start, if you didn't participate in the Pan-African Women's Day program yesterday, you really missed something. And I don't know, how many times we have to say this, but this is a wonderful example when we say we want Pan-Africanism. And I understand, I've been around long enough doing this work that I have a pretty good idea how people think in this capitalist society. And I know that when we talk about Pan-Africanism, for most people, it's so beyond their realm of their day-to-day life in this capitalist society that it's almost impossible for them to conceptualize an objective like Pan-Africanism being achieved. That's why these programs like Pan-African Women's Day are so important, is because it gives you a clear snapshot into what we're talking about when we say one unified socialist Africa. So the program yesterday was another wonderful manifestation of that, just like African Liberation Day was in May. The program yesterday, Pan-African Women's Day, it was filled with young African women, very young African women who were serious about this struggle for liberation. We had many of our own A-APRP and All African Women's Revolutionary Union, which is the women's union for the A-APRP. Young, wonderful, dynamic women participating in the program. Sister Inem, who's in Burkina Faso, was one of the panelists that participated and did an outstanding job. Our sister Takara did a wonderful, outstanding presentation at the end of the event that was so inspirational. And then we had participants, more young African women from our sister parties, Amilcar Cabral Ideological School in Nigeria, outstanding contribution. The Kenyan Socialist League from Kenya, outstanding contribution. Our two Eritrean sisters who were representing the Pan-African organizations connected to the East African nation of Eritrea, and just was a hugely inspirational, outstanding endeavor facilitated by our longtime cadre sister in Canada, Sister Tandiwe. So this was a wonderful manifestation. And if you missed it, it's just too bad, because this type of institution is so critical. Like a lot of people say, well, we have to, we don't have time to be talking. We just got to get to work. And those people, well-intentioned, don't really understand how true change comes about. Because if you use another example, like let's take the US mercenary military apparatus, for example. They don't just drive down the streets throwing uniforms and guns at random people on the street. They hook people in with their propaganda. They create an institution of propaganda. We do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day. That's a propaganda statement designed to encourage people to want to have initiative to be productive. Everybody wants to be productive. That's why they use that tagline to encourage and inspire people to believe that the best way to learn how to do that is to join the US mercenary military. Also, when they say the Marine Corps has one that says, we would tell you that after spending time in our training process, that you would be fatigued, you would be beat up, you would be overwhelmed, you would be just completely beaten down, but we don't want to sugarcoat it. And the purpose of that propaganda is to appeal to people's desire to want to be strong, to want to be able to deal with adversity, to want to be able to overcome obstacles, and to say that if you want to learn how to do that, the US military is the best institution to teach you the skills necessary to do that. So this is how they tie people in. And it's through this propaganda that they're able to get people so gung-ho to be involved in the US mercenary military. Yeah, of course, they recruit people by bribing them with all the benefits, but there are a lot of the people involved in those backward institutions believe in what those institutions say they're about. Even though it's a lie, that's not really what they're about. People believe it. So that's how you operate an institution, you all. So if we're going to defeat this empire, we have to have institutions that combat that backward propaganda. And Pan-African Women's Day, African Liberation Day, Black August, all of these things are our institutions designed to combat this backward propaganda, to promote the message that African women identifying people always are going to have to be at the forefront of our struggle if we're really ever going to be free. It cannot be a secondary or subset of any type of struggle. It has to be something that's in the forefront, and it's the responsibility of men to support women being able to reach their full potential in society. And it's a denunciation of these backward patriarchal ideologies that are suggesting somehow that men are just as oppressed as women and women identifying people. So we need institutions like Pan-African Women's Day to engage and inform people about these contradictions. We have to have that type of propaganda on a consistent basis. This is what we need. Yes, we need the guns, we need all of that stuff at some point, but we ain't even anywhere close to that yet. As was said, as Kwame Nkrumah said, there's a story that was told by our elder brother Sekou Neblet, who is a longtime cadre in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party in Ghana. And before that was a field marshal for the Black Panther Party. And before that was a singer for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee's SNCC Singers. And Baba Sekou, whose house I stay at when I'm in Ghana, was telling me back in the 60s in Guinea-Conakry, when Kwame Nkrumah was there, after being illegally overthrown by the US Central Intelligence Agency, or Criminals Action as we call them, and he was welcomed by the Democratic Party of Guinea and Sekou Touré in Guinea, and he was there as co-president. And one day, Baba Sekou told us one day he and Kwame Touré and a bunch of other, at that time, very young militants who had come over to Guinea, as African militants all over the world were doing during that time, and had come to Nkrumah's Villa Sile, where he was saying, with guns. And we're like, we're ready to return you to the presidency in Ghana, Your Excellency. And Baba Sekou said, Kwame Nkrumah looked at them all with the guns, started slowly shaking his head, and went to each of them and took the guns out of each of their hands and handed them books instead, and explained to them that the real weaponry we need right now is mass consciousness among our people. Once we have that, the gun part will be easy. If we don't have that, the gun part will never be successful. So this is why these types of institutions like Pan-African Women's Day are so important. And we understand people don't really understand that, because in this capitalist society, everybody wants everything instantly and quickly, and nobody wants to put in the work that's required to achieve the objectives that we need to achieve. But we're going to just keep doing what we're doing because we believe and we are convinced that this is exactly the type of approach that's needed right now. And the other things will happen concurrently with this, but we have to establish at least a baseline of political education before we can even effectively engage anything else. So Pan-African Women's Day is a critical part of that conscious raising. And just getting to the quickly with the origins of Pan-African Women's Day, again, in July of 1961, the Democratic Party of Guinea, who I just talked about, the party of Sékou Touré, that great Pan-Africanist revolutionary who is one of our ideologues in the A-APRP. In Guinea in 1961, July, the PDG hosted the All-African Women's Conference. And that was one of the things that happened, and that was hosted in Dar es Salaam, also with the outstanding agreement of Julius Nyerere and the wonderful revolutionaries that were organizing in that region, which was then Tanganyika, which is today Tanzania, and Dar es Salaam is the capital city there. And this conference produced the Pan-African Women's Organization, or PAWO. In July of 1962, the conference influenced the creation of the Pan-African Women's Organization. And it's that entity that pushed to help organize the first Pan-African Women's Day in July of 1962. So as was stated consistently yesterday in the program, this is the 59th year of this institution of Pan-African Women's Day. And then just continuing with that history, Pan-African Women's Day, or PAWD, has served almost 60 years, and it's an institution of emancipation for women and all people who do not identify as men. So in other words, the purpose of this institution, you all, is to raise the consciousness of the African masses around this question of the necessity for us to see women and women identifying people as important to the forward progress of humanity as any man anywhere on earth, and to break down the thousands of years of patriarchal indoctrination which commodifies women, institutionalizes the commodification of women. That's what patriarchy does. And I'll give you an example of that. Is I was looking at a documentary, Eyes on the Prize documentary, and it was talking about the work of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I've seen the documentary probably about 30 times, but I watched them over. I learned something new every time, and nobody should be thinking that's strange, because some of you all sit there and watch the same TV shows that ain't teaching you nothing, ain't helping you expand your mind at all. You watch the same TV shows and movies over and over. So don't act like you don't understand why somebody would want to watch something educational over and over. But I do that. And in this documentary, it was, talking about the late 60s, I think 1969, 68, 67, 68, somewhere there. And the people talking were men, and they were talking about how the language they were using. They were saying, we have to figure out how to create power for the Black man. And that was how people talked in those days. In fact, up through the early part of my developing activism, that was a common, acceptable way that people talked. And it was even explained as, well, you have to use some sort of vowel to describe humans that you're talking about. So at that point, saying man or men was considered socially acceptable to say that. And it was also said that during this documentary, the men that were speaking were saying that we have to ensure that we have an apparatus where men can protect the women, because otherwise there's no one that's going to be able to protect the women if men don't do it. And when this man said that, many of the women in the audience were shaking their head in agreement. Now, there's nothing wrong, of course, with us protecting each other. But the point is that period of time, just 50 short years ago, 50 years is not a long period of time. And I say that because I've been alive, even though I was a child at that time. I've been alive that whole time, and I'm still very spry and in very good spirits and health, so it can't be that long. So when that happened, that 50 some odd years ago, those values were considered the norm. They were normalized, you all. And although, like I said, there's nothing wrong with us protecting each other, what those values contributed to is the commodification of women and women identifying people, because the message in that analysis is that women and women identifying people were not capable and are not capable of having agency for themselves, of thinking for themselves, of acting for themselves, of engaging for themselves. And so what we're saying today is that we don't want to take away from, you know, whatever traditional, so-called traditional, whatever way people do things, people can decide that, but we don't have to base that on the commodification or the repression of women and women identifying people. Common sense dictates that whatever those realities are, that we can sit down as creative and sensible adults and decide them. So in other words, if you have a relationship and you are a man identifying person rather, and you're a woman identifying person, if you're a woman and woman identifying or whatever the case may be together, then you can decide that how people manifest their roles. And so if one person, you know, is going to open doors for the other person, whatever, you can decide that. It doesn't have to be determined based on this assumption that one person is weaker because of how they identify gender-wise or how they're perceived gender-wise. So this is what the type of stuff that we're trying to address today, because we cannot really move forward in any kind of concrete way if we don't address these types of contradictions. Because the only way we're going to be free is we have to ensure that everybody reaches their full potential. That just pushes me up. That just pushes me up, other than that pushes me forward. If the people who are oppressed and oppressed in a way that increases beyond the way that I'm oppressed, if they're pushed forward, that automatically means I'm going to be pushed forward. So it makes sense for me to respect and support their forward progress. And it makes absolutely no sense for me to see my role is to repress them and keep them from moving forward. That's keeping me from moving forward. So that's what we're saying. And the All African People's Revolutionary Party honored Pan-African Women's Day, and again, as a vehicle to institutionalize these types of anti-patriarchy analyses and practices, and the full participation of women and women identifying people, all people who don't identify as men in society. That again is the only way that we can move forward collectively as a people. And then this, of course, means that Pan-African Women's Day, by definition, makes it a revolutionary institution, because what we're saying is that we want to transform the society. And that is the definition of the word revolution, an uncompromising transformation of society. And transformation, of course, means changing from one material form to another, changing from one material form to another. And this is important to understand, because there's a lot of confusion about everything in this capitalist dominated world. And people will stand in front of you and say, well, I'm a revolutionary, just because they're angry. Like that literally happens in this society. I'm mad. I don't like the white man, so I'm a revolutionary. No, that doesn't make you a revolutionary. That makes you a fool, actually. A revolutionary is someone who is organizing to completely transform the capitalist system into something better. And you can't do that individually. So that means, by definition, if you call yourself a revolutionary, you have to be engaged in revolutionary organization, because revolution can't happen with one person waving a magic wand. So there's no possible way for you to be a revolutionary and you're not involved in revolutionary organization. That is a fantasy, and that's nothing except specific performative art to do that. And that's not what we're about. So we understand that that's not what revolution is. So we're not gonna, we're gonna call that out as a bunch of confusion and say that revolution means you have to be engaged in revolutionary organization to be considered a revolutionary. And Pan-African Women's Day, if you're a man identifying person, means that you have to challenge yourself to ensure that your work and everything you're doing in your life 24/7, 365 days a year is designed to ensure that women identifying people are being supported and being struggled with side by side to reach their full potential in society. And with that, I will turn it over to Shukura.
I mean, that was so much fire. I'm not even sure if I need to continue the presentation. But thank you for that, Daddy. Yeah, and I just to add on a few really cool facts that I found on the AAPRP-INTL website. Before I go into talking about this amazing comrade, I wanted to just highlight that, you know, we always talk about the importance of our alliance as a party with Cuba, and we also talk about how important celebrating African Liberation Day is. And so on the AAPRP International website, they actually have not only a whole subsection where it's about the ancestors, so you can find more information about Mama Mawina if you'd like, but they also have a tab that is strictly identified as women. And so once you click on it, then you get the history of the AAWRU, which stands for the All African Women's Union, which is a sub part of the AAPRP. And they have PowerPoint presentations where they have concised all of the achievements that the AAWRU has landed since its inception. And so I just wanted to highlight again, because we're always talking about Cuba and we're always talking about ALD, two important themes that connect the Pan-African Women's Day along with the AAWRU is alliance and organization. So they highlighted those two things over and over again yesterday. We had our solidarity speaker who was from Eritrea, and they talked about their solidarity with the Pan-African Women's Day. And for those that tuned in, I mentioned this in the chat here on Zoom, but I thought it was so cool and so dope that not all of the organizations that were speakers on the panel or speakers in general, the keynote speaker, not all of those people identified with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Some people had very different organizations that they identified with, but they still understood the importance of Pan-African Women's Day. And not only did they understand the importance, they worked in cahoots with the party to make sure that they helped plan it so that it could be this virtual event for people to tune in across the world, not just in the US. That's why we had different time zones and we had interpreters for different people who spoke French. We had interpreters for other people who spoke non-English languages. So I thought that was really cool. And of course, one of the speakers highlighted that we need to understand that this alliance is so important. So not only were we pushing yesterday, and all of the speakers were pushing that it's important to join an organization working for justice. Again, I bring that up because for those of you that have tuned in with us for this 75 odd weeks that we've been doing this, you have been hearing us say that it's important to join an organization, but I want you to understand other organizations also believe that that is the key. That is the key to unlocking revolution for all of us, because when we all join an organization, then we might be able to understand and experience what it means to work together as a collective. So whether you're a part of, African Democrats of Socialists or whatever, I just made up an organization name, or maybe you're a part of B-Stars, or maybe you're a part of the AAPRP, maybe you're a part of Liberation Road, like whatever your situation is of how you identify, working with other people is going to force you to develop tactical skills so that you can understand that you're going to have patience, because a lot of this revolution is not going to happen overnight. And because of that, we're going to have to work together, which means you're going to start to understand and better idealize and maybe even embody what some of the oppressions are that some of your fellow organizers are experiencing, especially if they don't identify like you do. And that's another reason why I thought Pan-African Women's Day was so critical and so important, because my dad made some excellent points about how we need to understand that Pan-African Women's Day is really important for everyone, especially people who do not identify as women. But we also need to understand that, the threat of oppression is real. And what I mean by that is if one of us is oppressed, then none of us can be free. And Martin said it best: a threat to justice anywhere is a threat everywhere. So that's why the party has taken the stance that we've taken, that we want to eradicate homophobia. We want to eradicate transphobia. We want to eradicate any threat to our family that identify with LGBTQ communities. Why? Because if they are oppressed, then they are going to be equally affected by our oppression and vice versa. That's how we talk about unification. And we, of course, have pushed this alliance where we understand that occupied Palestine, Palestinians need their land back. It's non-negotiable. That's all it is to it. We understand that the indigenous people need their land back. We are very clear that any person who identifies as being oppressed and belongs to a larger group of people who identify as being oppressed, Africans are not going to get Africa back if the Palestinians still don't have their land. Palestinians are not going to get their land back if the indigenous people still don't have their land. And LGBTQ people are going to continue to experience hatred and injustice because other people of color are experiencing it, or other people who identify in a different gender are experiencing a non-negotiable way of life because people are too closed-minded to understand that we all deserve to be free. And in understanding that, that means we're going to have to work together. So I want to highlight, I know I mentioned Cuba and ALD. I want to highlight that even after Mama Mawina died in 2007, the AAWRU led a delegation for May Day to be celebrated in Cuba. And it was between 2007 and 2008. And I just thought that was really cool. And then another really cool fact I wanted to share with you about the AAWRU is that in 2010, they organized the first African Liberation Day in St. John, Virginia Island. So just as we continue to think about how legacies become and how these historical or timelines become, that's because people have been doing this work for some 50 plus years. They've been involved with these different organizing spaces. And so now we're going to turn our attention and pay homage to someone that without their sacrifices and without their contributions, not just to the party, but to the world, I personally would not be here because I know that Mama Mawina had a tremendous impact on both of my parents. And so I know that her impact on them had everything to do with how they decided to raise me. And so I'm just super grateful for her. Unfortunately, I was not able to meet her before she transitioned, but I do know that she knows who I am. I know she knows, she's seen pictures, I'm sure. And she was a part of my growing up experience. And I'm just forever grateful for her. And like I said, her sacrifices. So she is the daughter of Norma McLallen and Alan Ferguson. And she was born in 1941 in Boston. And she is survived by her son, Michael, and her grandson, Euro. And so what we need to understand about Comrade Mawina is that she lived a life that was continuously revolved around centering people and putting them in the focus. Mawina was no stranger to joining an organization. It was clear that she understood that being a part of an organization was the only way to reach a better world for Africans. This explains why she joined the National Tenants' Right Organization, or NTRO. And not only did she join the organization, she became active immediately and hit the ground running and took on a leadership role position as the regional coordinator of NTRO organization. She had no issue taking on that leadership because she understood not only did the NTRO's values and missions align with work she was currently doing in her city of residence, but she also was very clear that this was one of the ways for her to start developing skills that she was going to be able to use later with the AAWRU and with other organizing efforts that maybe were in cahoots with the AAWRU and the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Next slide, please. So now we get to talk more about Mama Mawina's contribution specifically to the party and to the AAWRU, and I'm super excited. So I've actually organized my notes in subsections, and I'll read these subtitles for you all. So first, we're going to talk about her as an A-APRP warrior, okay? So in the A-APRP, she brought with her skills as an organizer of masses, and for every African Liberation Day, she organized bus loads of students. She brought women and women identifying people and workers to the ALD event that was held in DC. Every ALD, she did this. She organized and also had her connections with the tenants organization. So she also brought them, and she brought people, whether they were in Boston, and then she moved to the Lower East Side. And at one point she even lived in Harlem and continued to do that organizing. So between her bringing people on buses from the tenants organization and from different cities that she lived in, she always had busload of people that came to ALD and gave them the opportunity to be exposed to African Liberation Day and the importance of African Liberation Day. Why does it exist? And helping people hear from other speakers who live in other parts of the world. Some of the Zoom participants were talking today back and forth about how it was really, I would say, detrimental, unfortunately, to hear about Speaker Inem from Burkina Faso and how they were talking about conflicts and contradictions that affect Africans on the continent, and then tying it back to her experience in the US as well, and how we understand that Africans anywhere are oppressed. And I love that it's not just centering on Africans in America, because Africans everywhere are dealing with stuff. And we're all trying to figure out how we can come together. Indigenous people everywhere are experiencing stuff. We need to understand that it's not just this Western focused approach. That's not working. It never did, because it completely separates us from other people who identify with our group. And that's what the colonist wants us to do, is to separate. The colonist wants us to be separatists. The colonist wants us to think that our experiences are our own because we are, quote, Black Americans. That couldn't be farther from the truth. And if you don't believe me, you should pick up a book or try to do some research on the A-APRP's website, or even try to see if you can watch the Pan-African Women's Day recording or the ALD recording, because we have comrades talking about how police are getting more, I can't even think of the word, just more aggressive. There we go. I'll use aggressive. They're becoming more aggressive in Ghana. They're becoming more aggressive in other countries in Africa. Why is that? Well, my dad taught us a couple of weeks ago that police are being trained from Israel tech forces. And we know that Israel doesn't give a darn about people because they stole a group of land and didn't even think twice about the Palestinians. And the tactics that the police are learning in Ghana are the same tactics the police have here in the US. So we understand that it's a matter of time. We already know some youth have been killed in Africa from police brutality, but it's going to continue to rise. Family, it's going to continue to rise. And so we need to understand that there's no such thing as a separatist ideology, and there's certainly no such thing as oppression. When you are oppressed, you have no power whatsoever. And that also means that other people that look like you have no power whatsoever. So we need to continue to remember that and understand that Mama Mawina brought busloads of people to African Liberation Day, because she wanted people to hear from other speakers around the world and hear that the commonality was that we all are experiencing injustice. I just think that that's amazing. She broke barriers in setting trends in 1983 because she was one of 2 sisters to become the first women elected for the All African People's Revolutionary Party Central Committee. So before 1983, there were no women identifying people who were on the Central Committee. And that's one of our subcommittees that the party functions off of. And she broke that barrier, her and another comrade, sister woman identifying person, by becoming the first to be on the Central Committee. So again, their timeline, their choices, their contributions are impacting me. So we need to understand, like, this statement about I am not my ancestors, it could not be farther from the truth, because without her sacrifice and her comrade's sacrifice, I now have the opportunity to run to be a part of the Central Committee if I want to, without having any pushback or anything, because she already broke that trend for me and broke that barrier down. And I'm so, so grateful for that. In 2000, the union took the A-APRP home at Sister Mawina's determination, and they gathered and had a mass meeting with other revolutionary sister organizations at home, and this is in Guinea-Bissau. And we had a speaker in Guinea yesterday who unfortunately had a family funeral to attend, so we're uplifting them and sending them love and light during this time. But they still had a substitute speaker come in and speak and just talk about how we understand that we need to come home, and we also understand that that was such an impactful space for Mama Mawina. She actually was buried there. And I'll talk more about that later, but she decided to go back home, and she is buried to this day in Guinea. And so for her to have Guinea be the foundation for connecting other revolutionary sister organizations to the party, I mean, that goes without saying how impactful that could be. Because for every organization that came to this mass meeting, especially if they didn't already live in Guinea, they were able to go back to their respective country and continue to do organizing work and build those relationships that probably still exist to this day, especially because this is 21 years old. So I just think that that's amazing. And now we're going to move on to the subtitle, Uniting Community and Pan-Africanism. So Mama Mawina's revolutionary love was so broad and deep that her place of residence was known as a safe house for anyone in need, especially African women. And I couldn't find too many specifics on that, so I'm not sure if it was her safe house here in the US or her safe house in Guinea, but regardless, she opened up her space to anyone who was in a dangerous situation. And I don't know how many of us can say that we're willing to do that. So again, just her selfless act of trying to make sure that people weren't threatened and that people weren't endangered, that goes without saying of how incredible that was. After the assassination of Amadou Diallo, Mama Mawina, a true revolutionary woman, demonstrated the most conscious example of African love by creating another African organization. So she founded Women for Justice because she was tired of Africans being shot by police. And so she centered Women for Justice, she centered Women for Justice so that it could target bringing in women identifying people, and more specifically, women identifying people who may have had children. So they had a different investment in it because maybe they were worried about their children's safety. And she also made sure that she brought in other women identifying people who may unfortunately have had their partners be assassinated at their expense. So just as we continue to think about what her legacy is and what she has done, Mama Mawina opened up her house to people who were in dangerous situations. She started Women for Justice to help eradicate and reduce police brutality and assassination of people who were walking on the streets. And she made sure to have a mass gathering of sister organizations in Guinea-Bissau, which she later decided to be buried at later. And again, that mass gathering took place 21 years ago. But we know that even 2 decades and a year later, that meeting had the foundational roots, if you will, to grow this tree of why there were different organizations who collaborated and came together yesterday for Pan-African Women's Day. Next slide, please. And so we're going to continue with our subtitles. So now we're moving into alliance with other oppressed people's organizations. So Sister Mawina, 38 years as an activist and 29 years of organizing for the All African People's Revolutionary Party were critical to advancing the party's anti-Zionist, pro-African united front lines to significant heights. So Mama Mawina was a contributing factor to why the party has the line as anti-Zionist to this day. And she's actually remembered by the Palestinian community for blasting the Zionist enemy, even as her illness progressed. So unfortunately, she was diagnosed with cancer, but she continued to fight up to her last dying breath and her last day on this planet she was fighting. So even as her illness was getting worse and the cancer was taking over more of her body, in 2001, this is why the Palestinians pay homage to her. In 2001, she gave a passionate speech in Texas because she was speaking out against Zionism and speaking out against why it's not beneficial and how we need to understand occupied Palestine means the Palestinians need their land back. And she took on that position in 2001 in Texas. And for that, we continue to thank her because the party was able to build on top of her doing that because of the work she was doing. The next subtitle I'll speak about is It Finishes Where It Started. Africa is the beginning and the end. Never forget that. In December, on December 12th, the coalition will also never forget the dedication and commitment. So the December 12th coalition will never forget the dedication and commitment of Mama Mawina as a principled, tireless worker of the masses. She has led the A-APRP, A-AWRU delegations, get this, to Libya and Kenya, and has been instrumental in supporting critical A-APRP work in Azania, South Africa. She has often worked 2 jobs. One of them assisted thousands of us with travel arrangements to get home. So not only were party members trying to figure out how to get home, but she was a vessel. She was a bridge to help Africans get back home. Like, how amazing is that? She was the one saying, well, you're going to need a passport and make sure you have your malaria pills, and you want to make sure you get your malaria pills as early as however early you need to get them so that it can be in your system and you can be ready. Make sure that you order your passport, 3 to 4 years in advance so that you can make sure you get it, or whatever the timeline was at that time for ordering a passport. That's what Mama Mawina was doing, was making sure that Africans had no excuse to get back home. because she knew the importance of that. And more importantly, she knew that if Africans were able to get home and get to African soil, it would change them forever. And so then once they got back to wherever they were living, they would have a different ideology look on how we think about oppression. And more importantly, why it's important for us to get back home, because that is where we belong. It would reduce us being sick. Now, no, I haven't looked at any articles that support that, but I can tell you right now, Africans have a different way of doing things than we do here in the US. They cook their food differently. They grow their chickens and their produce much differently, where it doesn't have as many chemicals and nonsense like pesticides. They don't worry about trying to preserve stuff as much, so we don't have the extra high fructose corn syrup in Africa as we do here. And my dad will tell you, he's told me he hasn't eaten chicken for like 25 years, but the last time he went back home, he had some chicken and didn't get sick. Now, when have you ever heard of a plant-based person eating some type of meat and not getting sick from it? But that happened to him. And this is somebody who hasn't introduced chicken in their diet for at least 20-something years. So my point is, we know that how food is grown there is different. And so if we're eating healthier in Africa, that's obviously going to be correlated to how we have lower high blood pressure, we have lower obesity, we probably have more families that are nursing their children with human milk instead of formula and things like that. So it's setting the children off to a different trajectory. So my point is, there's definitely a chance that you would be healthier and not die from stress if you moved home. And I'm just saying that is something that we need to consider. Now, yes, there's problems in Africa just like there are everywhere else, but I guarantee you your self-esteem would not be in danger anymore if you move back home. I guarantee you, because you would have a better understanding of who you are. And no amount of medicine, no amount of journaling, no amount of anything can help address that except you going back home and seeing for yourself that you are okay, nothing is wrong with you. And there are other people like you who understand what your culture is, because they are you and you are them, and you all are a vessel and an extension of one another. So I talked about the December 12th coalition. I also want to mention that unfortunately, Mama Mawina did pass away in 2002. And so we need to continue to pay homage. But this is so cool. So in the same year that Mama Mawina transitioned, the Mawina Kouyate Pan-African School was established in Sierra Leone. So I've already mentioned that this comrade was born in Guinea-Bissau, buried in Guinea-Bissau. We just talked about how they did work in different countries where they had impacts in Libya and Kenya, and then they were able to help Africans get back to Africa. So those of us who wanted to travel back home, she assisted with that. And now we're talking about how she has a school in Sierra Leone. So I just mentioned 3 different countries, if not more, in Africa, where her legacy is not only growing, but it is invasively being latched on to how we think about her on the continent. So it's very clear that she has had an impact on our communities. And it's also very clear that Africans understand that. Because unfortunately, we know here in the US that they pay homage to people who are bad and who kill and rape people by naming schools and parks after them. But it makes total sense that she would have a school in Sierra Leone because she's earned it. And I just think that's so cool that students can go to that school and say they went there and earned an education after her legacy and continuing with the work that she was doing. That is so dope to me. And then also in the same year, in 2002, the Young Pioneer Institute, which is an organization I am very familiar with, also known as the YPI, the YPI targets the AAPRP's children. So basically, if your parents are with the A-APRP, then by default, you are identified with the YPI organization, because that means that you're a part of the party too. So it's an extension or an appendage, if you will, of the A-APRP. So the YPI Institute that was established by the AAWRU, by the way, was relinquished to the A-APRP, which is so, so cool to me, because that means that the AAWRU, the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, gave birth to YPI because they understood that we need to have an organization. We need to have a way to take care of our children while we're having these chapter meetings and these central committee meetings. We need to have materials and books and coloring utensils and resources and activities to keep our children occupied so that they can be focused on what they're doing while we're in the other room having our meeting to help with the ideological reading and to discuss world geo things and things of that nature. And so the Young Pioneers Institute was created from AAWRU, but it was released to the AAPRP because the AAPRP needs to understand that we need to continue to organize our children. And that was one of the theme takeaways from yesterday's event as well, was that they also understood that we have to target our children. Our children are the future, along with women identifying people. We all are the future in terms of how we think about organizing and teaching our children the importance of organizing. So when we think about this, I want to make sure that the next time you're doing a libation or the next time you want to pay homage to the ancestors, think about Mama Mawina and think about their legacy in terms of how the party is stronger because of them. Remember the mass meeting that she organized in Guinea-Bissau. Remember that she opened her house up to people. Remember that she started the Women for Justice organization, and she was a member, regional director of the NTORO organization I mentioned. So just think about all these things that she did as she continued to elaborate and make sure that the A-APRP was stronger and better than we are today. And we are so grateful for her. And make sure you pour a revolutionary libation for her, because she has definitely earned it, and then some, as we continue to honor and think about Africa's mighty daughter and Pan-African freedom fighter, Mama Mawina Kouyate. Thank you so much. And thank you, Comrade Mama Mawina, for all that you have done for me as a cis woman to benefit off of your legacy. I am so grateful, and I am your ancestor, because without you, I physically would not be here, but I ideologically would also not be here. And I thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Shukura, for laying out who Comrade Auntie Mawina was and what her contributions. I just had a couple of just very quick things to add that are essential to her legacy. One is that Comrade Mawina served as the All African People's Revolutionary Party and All African Women's Revolutionary Union's representative to the planning committee of the original Million Man March in Washington, D.C. on October 16th, 1995. And if you know the history of that event, there were 2 million Africans on the mall on that day. And there was a planning committee that planned the event. And that committee consisted of people like Minister Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam, Maulana Karenga, Dr. Maulana Karenga from the US organization, Dr. Conrad Worrell, and the A-APRP. And the A-APRP was asked to send a representative, and the organization voted to send Sister Mawina because we wanted to struggle with the organizers of the march to recognize that African people, not just African men, are under attack. Now, this is 26 years ago, so that's overwhelmingly significant. And I know a lot of folks, you know, especially folks that ain't involved in organization, you know, your way of seeing things is from this individualistic perspective. So, you know, a lot of people will take positions like, well, that's the Nation of Islam, I don't deal with them. And, you know, people say that kind of stuff to me all the time. And I know the minute they say it that they're not involved in any active struggle for liberation, because people that are never say ridiculous things like that. You know, there are 2 million Africans on that day in DC. And then in October 15th, 2015, there were another 2 million there on that day. So the people saying, well, I don't deal with that, I don't deal with those people that put that together. You can't even get 5 people to come to a cookout in your backyard. And we got 2 million people on 2 separate occasions that Farrakhan was able to get to DC. I'm going to DC so I can talk to my people. And I worked with both Million Man marches, as did a number of All African People's Revolutionary Party comrades. And we were able to talk to thousands of our people. And when Minister Farrakhan gave the address at the 1995 event, he said, join some organization working for our people. So if you're paying even the slightest bit of attention, you know that that's the line of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. That was our contribution to the platform of the Million Man March. See, y'all don't get it. That's why we involve ourselves in these events, because we were able to talk to millions of Africans with that message of join an organization. And according to even US intelligence agencies, some 700,000 African people joined organizations from that call. Those are people that we didn't have the capacity to reach if we hadn't participated on that platform. So y'all got to understand, that's how you organize. People don't know nothing about organizing. That's how you do that. And Sister Comrade Auntie Mawina was our central link to the Million Man March because she was on the planning committee for that event. So that was a very serious contribution that she made, a historical contribution. And along with that, she also participated in organizing the 1999 trip to Harlem, New York, because that's where she lived. Shukura, you had said that she had a safe house that was in Harlem. I was there. I went there many times. Her house was basically the de facto headquarters for the All African People's Revolutionary Party for years, the U.S. headquarters, and it was her house, and that was in New York, in Manhattan. And she served on the planning committee to bring Comrade Fidel Castro to Harlem. He spoke at the Obsidian Church. The video's on YouTube, and she was on the planning committee for that. That's very important, especially in light of the unwarranted and immoral attacks against socialist Cuba that are taking place today. It's essential that that relationship was solidified, and the party has always maintained that type of principled relationship with Cuba and with revolutionary Libyan Jamahiriya before American imperialism destroyed it in 2011. And Sister Mawina was central to helping us build and maintain those critical relationships. And then finally, I just want to make one correction, Shukura, to what you said. It was great, your presentation, but Sister Mawina was actually buried in Gambia, not Guinea-Bissau. She was buried in Gambia. She went to Gambia the last period of her life, and she was buried there. And I actually, had the opportunity to go to her grave, so I know that it's in Gambia. But that's okay. You did an excellent job doing that presentation. And just for everyone else, like as Secretary said, the only people that don't make mistakes are people that aren't doing anything. So most people are afraid to do anything at all because they don't want to put themselves in a position where they can receive any type of criticism. But we're revolutionaries. We're not concerned about criticism. We're concerned about growing stronger so we can become strong enough to knock this enemy on their rear end. So we appreciate and respect the wonderful tribute that you gave to Comrade Mawina, Shukura. And then lastly, I just want to say that you did meet Comrade Sister Mawina, but you were way too young to remember it. In 1993, our Central Committee had a meeting at Compton College in Compton, California, and you were, very young, but you were there. And Comrade Sister Mawina actually spent time watching you. You were, what would you have been? Only like 4 or 5 years old, so you wouldn't be expected to remember that. But you did actually meet Comrade Sister Mawina, and she did spend time with you there in Los Angeles and Compton, California in 1993. So we appreciate and respect, as Shukura said, Comrade Sister Mawina had a tremendous impact on me. I got a chance to work with her quite a bit on a number of projects and just appreciate her contribution and live through her legacy and struggle to try to fulfill her consistency and manifest that in whatever humble contribution I and Shukura and the rest of us can make going forward. So we just want to close out, as we always do, by encouraging you to continue to support these efforts to spread the word. We're trying to wake people up and make sure people understand that there are alternative, independent voices out here that are much better than MSNBC and CIA and CNN and all that other, Fox and all that nonsense. And so we want to encourage you to support these independent voices. Y'all kill me. Well, we support Black voices and you won't do anything to support independent. Well, you don't support our voices unless you support these independent voices. You can't say that and the only people you want to listen to are Kamala Harris. That ain't saying nothing because she's not an independent African voice at all. She's a voice for American imperialism. So if you really, truly want to support independent agency for African people, you have got to support these entities. And by these entities, I'm saying that We have AAPRP-INTL.org there on your screen, left-hand center of your screen. That's our All African People's Revolutionary Party website. Please go there, join the AAPRP. You'll see a short orientation video, and it'll connect you with the organizer closest to you, and we can get that started to getting you involved in a work study group, a political education group. So we would love to do that. And our site is abetterworld.me. Go by there. Every one of these events is videotaped and housed there, so you can see them, all 78 of them. You can see them, and you should donate. Please donate. Support independent revolutionary African organization and our work. And then hoodcommunist.org, of which I'm an editor for. We have our bi-monthly Telegram event. It'll be 2 weeks from last Thursday. Look out for that. Download Telegram so you can participate in that. And this August, we're going to be dedicating it to Black August, which is a commemoration of African freedom fighters. We don't celebrate American mercenary U.S. military personnel. We celebrate the true freedom fighters for African liberation. So that's what Black August is. And we have a number of these podcasts. A-APRP Pantula, I still don't have that, right? It's actually every Monday. And you can look it up, but look that up, please. I don't have the time, right? The Forward Ever podcast on Spotify, look that up. Revolutionary African Women, the last Saturday of each month. Our comrades in New Mexico, APRP New Mexico, every Thursday, 11 a.m. Boy, this is wrong. I got to correct this. It's 12 noon Mountain Time on Thursdays. I'm having such a difficult time getting these times right. I'm dyslexic with that. So please forgive me. And then next Sunday, we will be here commemorating Black August. So doing a presentation commemorating Black August. We ask you to join us next Sunday. And to all of these things, y'all, please bring one person. Y'all, we said this for a couple of weeks, and I know y'all ain't told nobody. Try to find, even if you got to stand in front of a supermarket and invite somebody, please help us spread this word. Please buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. I'm not bragging. It's a necessary piece of literature. So get you some people and read it together so we can get organized to smash this patriarchy, to smash this capitalist hegemony, to smash this oppressive empire. We need to come together to do that. We appreciate everybody. We hope to see you back here next Sunday. Forward ever, backwards never. Always stay clever in any endeavor. Smash patriarchy. It's a backward, decadent system of oppression. Smash homophobia. It's the same thing. And capitalism, y'all already know, it's got to go. We hope you enjoyed the rest of your wonderful Sunday afternoon.